Racial identity itself is not formed within isolation. Families are often the first place where ideas about race, belonging, and normalcy are introduced. These lessons are not always explicit. Many times they appear through casual advice or everyday conversations, but they can reflect larger systems of power and privilege. When I was younger, I had an older family member advise me to always mark white on applications or official forms. At the time, this advice felt practical and harmless. I understood it as the correct choice rather than as something connected to race or identity. As I grew older and began reflecting on this advice, I realized it was not as neutral as it first appeared. What seemed like simple guidance was actually an early lesson about which identities are considered safe, more acceptable, and more valued within US society. Being told to mark white shaped my understanding of identity as something strategic rather than personal. It suggested that proximity to whiteness could offer protection, access, and fewer obstacles. I recognize that my ability to benefit from this advice reflects privilege, because not everyone has the option to claim whiteness or move through institutions without their racial identity being questioned. My own personal experience aligns closely with sources I have gathered while conducting my research for this project. The following researchers can help explain how everyday family interactions can reproduce racial privilege even when there is no harmful intent. Hagerman discusses how white families often socialize children through ordinary conversations that frame whiteness as normal, neutral, and invisible. This helps explain why the advice I received felt practical rather than racialized. Sismadia and Atkin describe racial survival strategies, which are ways that families help children navigate a society structured by racial inequality. While these strategies are often framed as protection, they can unintentionally reinforce the idea that whiteness is an advantage. Hazelbaker and Mystery further show how white children are taught to negotiate racial identity in ways that preserve comfort and social privilege, reinforcing racial hierarchy without explicitly naming it. These family lessons do not exist in isolation. They are shaped by larger systems and historical policies that have rewarded proximity to whiteness in the past. Policies such as redlining and discriminatory housing practices tied whiteness to wealth, stability, and neighborhood safety. Although these policies are no longer legal, the effects of them continue to shape access to education, housing, and employment today. Family advice like the guidance I received reflects an awareness of these unequal structures and shows how individuals adapt to systems that remain racially stratified. This shows that racism is not only maintained through laws, but through everyday practices and decisions. Advice like the one I received is not an isolated moment. It is part of a larger pattern that normalizes racial hierarchy and sustains racial privilege over time within the United States. Making a difference requires intentional disruption of these patterns. Families can begin by having honest conversations about race and privilege, explaining why racial strategies exist rather than treating them as neutral or necessary. These conversations should shift focus on responsibility rather than guilt. By examining my personal experience through a broader strategical lens, this project shows how racial privilege is reproduced through everyday family interactions. When families confront racial hierarchy instead of quietly adapting to it, they create opportunities to challenge inequality and contribute to broader social change.